Welcome back to Closer Look, Friday edition with Michael Friscolani. I'm Scott Sexsmith on this first day of August. Great discussion last night with Steve Paikin. Love the glow. Good tan going. He's obviously rested and soaking up some relaxation.
His quote-unquote retirement. He's super busy working on his new podcast. It was a great chat. Mm-hmm. We've had Steve on a few times to talk about things. He's just such a respected journalist in this country. Some of the people look to for great discussions. He's had so many, like he said, thousands and thousands of different panelists on his different shows over the years. We're very excited to be sort of partnering with Steve, and we're going to be running his new podcast through our local news feeds every Saturday morning at 8 o'clock, starting this Saturday, August 2nd, because today's August 1st, like you just said. So it's a great collaboration. We think, just adds a little bit more to the great journalism we're doing across our communities. The conversations he has with people are obviously relevant to everybody across the province, and so we're excited to see that.
Okay, we mentioned the first day of August, which was a very important deadline date as far as the tariff situation goes. What's the latest?
Yeah, there was a no deal. Kind of by supper time yesterday, it was kind of clear that it wasn't happening. Yeah. Trump was musing on to reporters about how, Canada called and he hasn't talked to them yet. Then by, supper time, he'd signed an executive order putting in the 35% tariffs. It's kind of complicated, but these are new tariffs on things that are not already covered by the current free trade agreement that we have with the United States. The bottom line is big industries like lumber, steel, aluminum are still dealing with those hefty tariffs, like steel, for example, with the 50% tariff. Yeah. So there's been no new movement on that. That's where we're still stuck on that. So that's where, Carney put out a statement just after midnight talking about how we're just going to keep doubling down on what we had promised to do. We're going to build Canada strong. We're going to find new markets to be trading with. We're going to use a lot of these products at home to build Canada in a big way. We've talked about this before, and we've had guests talk about this. There's some doubt about whether that's enough to make up for such a massive loss to that customer, right? Michael Garcia, the CEO of Algoma Steel, has been on the show a couple times, and the last time he was here, he talked about how 50% tariffs doesn't leave them a lot of time to figure out a new way forward. And so I can imagine at his company and a lot of other companies today, they're thinking, our leash is very short on how to do this. Now, the Liberal government has said consistently they've promised that they're going to protect Canadian jobs. They're going to do all they can to protect those particular industries and support those particular industries. It's sort of started. We've seen different things happening, so we'll see if that's possible. I mean, I think if you talk to a lot of people, there's a lot who never believed there would be a trade deal by today, that it wasn't going to happen. But it is. It's just more unknowns as we head into the rest of the summer and into the fall. And like I said, I can only imagine what's going on in a lot of these industries right now.
All right. Tonight on the program, Ontario Liberal leader Bonnie Crombie, the Liberal Party getting set for their annual general meeting coming up September the 12th through the 14th in Toronto. And I guess the big question a lot of people are asking, is Bonnie Crombie the right person to lead the party into the next election in 2026?
It's very much in the news today, or in the last few weeks. There's kind of been a new group of Liberals who are saying that it's time for her to go. Nate Erskine-Smith, the Toronto MP, who was finished second in the leadership race to her in 2023, was on our show last week and has been vocal about the fact that he thinks her time is up. One of the key questions is at this annual meeting that they're having in this mandatory review, their party constitution says it's 50 plus 1%, right? Is enough for her to stay on as party leader. Is that enough? That some leaders have resigned with much more support than that. They don't think 50% is enough. So that's one of the questions we're going to ask Bonnie Crombie and just going to get her to sort of, she's been on the offensive as well, and her supporters have been on the offensive in the last couple of weeks, trying to pitch why she should continue to be the leader heading into whenever the next provincial election is. So we have a lot of questions for her. We appreciate the opportunity to chat with her.
The Ontario Liberal Party will be holding its annual meeting coming up September the 12th through the 14th in Toronto. We're very excited to have with us tonight the leader of the Ontario Liberal Party, Bonnie Crombie. Bonnie, welcome back to the show. Always good to see you.
Thanks very much. I think the last time I was on the big red bus and we were right in the middle of the campaign.
Well, it's funny that you mentioned that. That is actually the last time that we talked, and we had all kinds of fun during that conversation, as we will today. But Bonnie, fair to say that since that day, a lot has changed.
Yes, we did go to an early election. Of course, as government manipulated the election date, they were to have gone June 2026, which we were planning for. And suddenly, lo and behold, they thrust us into an election in February of 2025. And I'm going to put the argument forward that they did that because of the significant gains the Ontario Liberal Party was making. The fact that our numbers had been climbing, I had raised our popular support by about 10%. We were raising money, $6 million last year to enable us to fund or fully fund our campaign, and $5 million to date this year. And that's pretty significant in a year where we didn't win the election.
Mm-hmm. On a recent podcast, I think last week, you mentioned how you and your party, you conceded you weren't ready for the snap election, as you just said. You were actually preparing for this election in June 2026, which was more than a year away from that. Why were you focused on June 2026, Bonnie, when it seemed like most everyone in the province seemed to realize that a snap election was a very real possibility?
When did they realize that? Let me ask you. In December, in January?
Yeah.
Sure.
Mm-hmm.
But I had become leader the previous January. I was leader for 13 months, and we thought we had a 2.5-year runway because there is a fixed date election. We have fixed date elections for that reason, so that the premier can't manipulate the date based on his own polling or his own need. Yet, when they saw our numbers climbing and the fundraising, the dollars coming into the Ontario Liberal Party, they got nervous. I will suggest to you that their operatives said, boy, you're going to have a tougher time next year. You better concoct a reason to go this year. And so I think Donald Trump handed them that. They were looking for a ballot question, and they got it with trade and tariffs and this threat to our economy. And I still believe the biggest threat to our economy is Doug Ford. But nonetheless, I think that's what happened.
Bonnie, during that podcast interview that Frisco just mentioned, you said multiple things were stacked against us. What did you mean by that?
Well, let's start with the fact that they ran $8 million worth of attack ads on me. The Ontario government ran $120 million in feel-good ads for the province of Ontario, when in a normal year, any government would only spend about 20 million. Like, that's a vast amount. So they were seeding the ground, apparently. I think that also the weather wasn't optimal, but that's the least of my concerns. Federally, we were in a leadership vacuum. We had a prime minister who was not as popular as he had been, had resigned, and a lot of Liberals flocked to the excitement of a new leadership campaign. And there was a vacuum of leadership that both Doug Ford and Danielle Smith tried to fill to play that Captain Canada role until the new prime minister, Mark Carney, was selected. So we were carrying over at that time as well some of the bad feelings that had been existing toward the tail end of our previous prime minister, and the lack of a new prime minister being selected yet. So there was a little bit of that, and resources were leaving our party even during an election to go fight a leadership race.
Mm-hmm. How much of that falls on you as leader, Bonnie, in hindsight, to not see that this was still a potential, even though, let's say, the rumblings began in December? Some might say, yes, there were a lot of things stacked against you. Some of the things you're saying are accurate, but how much rests with you?
Well, ultimately, the buck always stops with me, and I take full accountability. But I also want you to remember that we were a pack of 9 independents. Mm-hmm. We didn't have a lot of resources. We certainly don't have the resources now that we've received 30% of the vote and 5 new caucus members and almost $4 million in funding to create our Liberal Caucus Services Bureau, to give us that additional support, to build back our unheld ridings, to build up our comms team, to build up our issues management and research team. We didn't have that then. It would be Adil Shamji saying, I read this report. I think this is something we should go out on. I'll book the media studio. Who's in? That's how we got our key messages across. Mm-hmm. Whether it was Adil or any other of the 9 members of caucus, largely our staff were volunteers. They each had 1 member. We did not have the capacity then. We did not have the team. And yes, we were fundraising and building up our war chest, as I like to call it. But let's be honest, we knew we had to set that money aside in the event that there would be an early election. We were building it towards an election, and we couldn't be spending it until that writ was dropped.
There was a sense that there was some catching up. There was some scrambling going on. Some candidates weren't nominated until the election had started. Yeah. Was there a moment in the couple weeks before election was called where your team realized that, man, this is really going to happen?
Yeah, so it's really late. I would call it January. We thought, boy, we might have $12 million to spend in the next month. That's a lot of money. We better get to it. And they started doing the research on planes and buses and all of that, and the branding that we needed. But with respect to the candidates, we were on track to have all our candidates in place for June 2026. So when the early call came, we were in good shape. I think we only lacked 14. That's not too bad. But our people went through a very thorough vetting. And so I would say the last 14 didn't receive quite so thorough a vetting. And maybe there were a couple of issues with a couple of them, but not bad.
You campaigned. Sorry, Bonnie, go ahead. I cut you off.
No, I was going to say, when there are fixed date elections, you put a certain amount of trust in the fact that that won't be manipulated because it's not supposed to be.
If you become premier, will you commit to keeping fixed date elections and not call snap elections?
I don't think there was a reason to call an early and unexpected, and it was a very expensive election. There wasn't a reason for it. I mean, certainly the premier wasn't leading the negotiating table federally or ever going to sit one-on-one with Donald Trump. That just was not going to happen. Even I think he misled the Ontario voters that he was. He will never sit at a negotiating table with Donald Trump.
In terms of healthcare, it was a big part of your platform. And I guess maybe because of what was happening with Donald Trump and people concerned about their jobs, it perhaps didn't resonate as much as it may normally in a typical election campaign. Did you find that? Were you surprised that the healthcare question wasn't a big part of the campaign? Wasn't on people's minds as much as you might have hoped?
So this is always strategy, campaign strategy. Do you respond or do you try to reframe the ballot question? And our odds were better if we tried to reframe the ballot question rather than going out on that which the premier was going to. When you are the sitting premier, like the sitting prime minister who fought his election, you have the megaphone. You can speak with credibility on those issues because you have that role. So we tried to shift away and say, all right, well, the premier is running off to Washington, pretending he's Captain Canada. What's happening here at home? The basics aren't being provided. 2.5 million people don't have a family doctor. 11,000 people are waiting for surgery or treatment or care, and 2,000 each and every day are being treated in a hallway. Hallway medicine is worse. ERs are closing. People can't afford to buy homes. He's promised tax cuts. He's never delivered them. So we try to run on, yes, healthcare, also affordability, homes, and tax measures that hadn't been promised and delivered, and an education platform as well. So that was the difference. We tried to say the basics weren't being provided. He didn't protect the jobs he said he was going to. He didn't insulate the economy in any way or diversify our trading partners in the 7 years that they had to do so. And I think we talked about this a little bit the last time. Does Doug Ford have relationships with the top 17 governors that we traded with? The answer is no. All that money we poured in at the very end into the United States should have been seeded all along since now. We saw him on CNN and Fox News rather than on Canadian media. We were paying Canadian voters, Ontario voters, were paying for those spots. $1 million every time he was on Fox News or CNN. I don't think that's how you conduct yourself. And let me say something about interprovincial trade barriers as well. Jason Kenney in Alberta brought all the premiers together 7 years ago while he was premier to knock down trade barriers. The one obstruction to knocking down trade barriers back then was Doug Ford. So I'm just to say he had an opportunity to make a difference, and he didn't, and he should have back then. And there was plenty of time to expand our markets abroad, and he didn't do that either.
All right, let's shift gears, Bonnie, and talk about next month. The Liberal Party will be hosting its annual general meeting in Toronto. We mentioned the dates off the top, September the 12th, it kicks off. It will include a mandatory review of your leadership. Now, according to party constitution, you must receive the support of more than 50% of delegates to stay on. The question, Bonnie, why should members continue to put their faith in you?
That's a great question. And of course, I'm going to earn their trust as I do each and every day. When I came to be leader of the Ontario Liberal Party, I want to make it very clear. I didn't do this for personal gain. I hadn't been demoted out of my caucus from cabinet or anything. I left a fantastic job as the mayor of the greatest city in Canada, of Mississauga, and I enjoyed every day my role. However, I thought there was a need for someone of my skill set, the business background that I bring, the fact that I have governing experience and have run a government quite competently, that I'm compassionate yet business oriented. So I thought there was a role for me at the provincial level, won the leadership race. And I did so because I care deeply about this party and I care deeply about people. I'm not hungry for power. I'm hungry about doing the right thing for people. And I'm here to rebuild this party. We have had 9 regional meetings across the province, plus a provincial executive council with all the riding presidents. And we've listened to the constructive input that they have made on what went wrong with the campaign. And you and I can go over some of those other things, that what we did right, what we did wrong, and what we plan to change. And I am committed to revitalization of our party and bringing forward, because we have a path forward, the kinds of changes that I've heard that people are asking for. So things like earlier nominations. There are the small towns and rural areas, there are smaller ridings up north, and even some of the urban ridings where candidates want to get a head start and start knocking on doors, and they want an early nomination. And we're going to open up early nominations as of January. We heard, we listened. Our northern and rural ridings need more support. Well, that's great, because now, because of Liberal Caucus Services Bureau, we have an outreach team and an outreach desk, and we're mentoring our unheld ridings, and each of our MPPs, in fact, has a mentoring role with 4 or 5 ridings. We're going to put an emphasis on rebuilding PLAs, and the outreach teams will help us do that. We'll be leveraging our MPPs, the outreach team, people on the ground in every community across the province, and our federal counterparts. Where they have held ridings, we're going to try to leverage some of them. Our people love to get together and talk policy. I've got to tell you, we had a thinkers conference last year, and it just wasn't enough. They want to get on the floor of a plenary, and they want to hash out motions and resolutions and have discussion, and we're going to deliver that for them next year, because we haven't had one in 7 years. If you don't count the one we did last year, was more of a thinkers conference. We also have to review our vendors. The data collection was inadequate. Our digital capacity was inadequate, but now that we have the resources, we're able to do that. So we are going to be getting election ready, and we're starting to get election ready for the next election, whether it's in 2.5 years, 3 years, or 4 years. Right now, we're taking it back to the grassroots. I'm here to say we have listened, we acknowledge mistakes were made, and we are prepared to rebuild and revitalize and move forward together, because we are strongest when we act together. We need to be united against our common opponent, not against each other.
Mm-hmm. On that vein, there are some in the party who've been vocal about they don't believe that the 50% plus 1 is enough for you to stay on, that you should resign if you don't receive at least 2/3 support. What do you say to those people, Bonnie?
Well, again, they don't set the threshold. The Constitution does, and ultimately the leader decides. But I'm not here about a specific number. I'm here about regaining trust from the party. We let them down. They wanted to win. I wanted to win. And we are going to win if we work together. We have to be united, not divided. We have one common enemy. And if we're not fighting each other, we're fighting our common opponent, and that is Doug Ford and the Conservative government. And we are strongest when we work together.
So what? Just want to make sure, what's the right threshold for you? Is there a number? Is 50 plus 1% enough?
We're not going to get into specifics. We're here to build back trust with voters and deliver the kinds of changes that they've been asking for. And we're already on it. We are already on top of it. We're writing a report about, the previous campaign, what went wrong. Like, we had a lot of successes. we did get 30% of the vote versus 18.5 for the NDP. That's pretty significant. Their vote is what's called more efficient. It translated to more seats. We won more broadly, but listen, we lost by some very narrow margins in a lot of places, by 20 votes in Erin Mills, by 39 votes in Burlington, by 140 in Eglinton Lawrence, and in York Southwest and the same, by about 150. We came a very strong second in 77 ridings, and we increased our popular support in 102 of the 124 ridings. So that is great. And the resources that we have gained through fundraising and through our vote count, the 33%, has allowed us to build Liberal Service Caucus Bureau. And I think the difference today is that people see me more often. I was spending more time on tour, traveling across the province, getting to know the small towns and having people in smaller areas come to know me and our vision for the party. But now when the legislature sits, they're going to see me at Queen's Park. So we have a strategy meeting in the morning when we talk about question period and allocate the questions and the themes. Unfortunately, John Fraser is asking my questions. But when we come out of question period and the doors open, it's me. It's me responding to the press. So you get to see me on the 6 o'clock, 12 p.m. or 6 p.m. news. And people are saying, geez, we're seeing you around a little more. So I'm now committed to continue to do the traveling, but not when the House is in session. And then you're going to ask me about a seat. Let me say that.
We were going to ask you that. So go ahead. Yeah.
Did you get a copy of these?
We didn't send you any questions in advance. We didn't send you.
So Mississauga was very humbling to lose Mississauga. I got to say, I didn't see that coming. We were fighting that big blue machine, and apparently the city of Brampton was released to help the mayor's mother-in-law. So that one hurt. It still does. I won't deny that. In the polling we did, this was going to be a good riding. I was not 100% sure myself, but we all won the advance polls in Mississauga. So all 6 ridings were well ahead after the advance close. We knew we do the advance last, so we can calculate whether we're ahead or behind then, and we were ahead. So whatever happened, the changes in Mississauga came towards the end when a lot of resources came into the riding, people resources from the city of Brampton. When you looked around, there was every billboard and every bus shelter had been purchased. There was a marked tone and difference, and the premier was spending a lot of time there as well. So I think we got outgunned by that big blue machine. That'll never happen again. Now, I will say that there's a natural attrition of about 2 seats a year. Plus, there are a number of MPPs who had made it public that they didn't intend to run again. And yet, because of the snap call, they were told that their name was going back on the ballot. So we think there will be some good opportunities to get a seat very, very soon. And I mean a viable seat.
Yes, in a by-election. In a by-election, you mean? In
a by-election, that's correct. I'm not asking anyone to step down unlike the federal Conservative Party. Every single member is an integral part of the team, has worked hard to get there and deserves to be there. So I'm not asking anyone to step down, but I know that there will be opportunities for a viable seat.
Okay, Bonnie, I know you don't want to talk specific numbers where the leadership mandate is concerned, but one guy who does, and you know where I'm going with this, is Nate Erskine-Smith. He's hung up on the 66% cut line. Nate was on our show last week, very critical of your leadership, saying, and I'm quoting here, "We need a new leader who's going to energize people, motivate people, and inspire people to get involved in our politics." How do you respond to him?
Well, I'm not really going to respond to him. He has his views and I have mine. I mean, the only thing I will say is he should pick a lane. He was an MP, ran for leader, announced he wasn't going to run again, then was offered a position and ran again. And if he really wanted to make a difference in this party, he would have run in February, not as a provincial Liberal, not as a federal Liberal, didn't gain his seat, didn't gain his cabinet position back. And so now he's running for leader again. So this is a man who's really not a team player, not of a federal team, not of the provincial team, and I don't think he's decided what kind of contribution he wants to make. So when you look at the fundraising I've done and the travels across this province are unsurpassed. I have raised under the new rules, the kind of money they used to raise back when the days we had corporate donations. If you need to compare our fundraising ability, take a look at our leadership. I raised $2.5 million to his $500,000. So there's no comparison. I guess he's just looking for a new job, and good for him. But I'm not in this for personal gain. As I said, I left. I resigned from an amazing job that I loved because I put this party first. And I will continue to put the people of the Ontario Liberal Party and Ontario Liberals, but Ontarians first. I have no other agenda other than build back this party, serve Ontarians, and form the next government. Those are my goals. I'm very transparent. I work very hard each and every day. Our days are long, and I'm very committed. I'm not going anywhere.
We know you're very busy, so just a couple more quick questions, Bonnie. Appreciate it.
Sure.
Obviously, we're chatting with you on a very big day around the world, and for Canada-U.S. relations, there was no trade deal made between Canada and the United States at the self-imposed August 1st deadline. A lot of concern, obviously, around the country. If you were the premier today, what would be the first thing you'd do?
Well, if I were the premier today, I would have made a lot of changes started 7 years ago, as I well mentioned, to diversify our trading partners, both abroad with less reliance in the United States, have better relationships in the United States, and domestically with my fellow premiers. I would have also, as I have done in the city of Mississauga, insulated my economy better. He talks about protecting jobs. Jobs are leaving this province. 40,000 manufacturing jobs, even more construction jobs, because believe it or not, BC, Alberta, and Quebec have figured out how to build housing, but here in Ontario, we have not. So he needed to have better insulated, look for investment to bring in. I brought in $8 billion worth of investment into Mississauga and created tens of thousands of jobs. He hasn't done so. They put all the eggs into the EV battery basket. And of course, now that's very concerning as well. And yes, we need to protect OEM, but we need to protect steel, aluminum, softwood lumber, all those sectors that are under threat right now today with higher tariffs. We're dealing with a president with a very delicate ego who uses bully tactics. So I encourage the Prime Minister to stand his ground. If it means reciprocal tariffs, it means reciprocal tariffs. We have to stand firm and we have to stand tough. And let's not be fooled. The province of Ontario hasn't done enough to insulate our own economy. For instance, why are we even not sitting in the legislature until after Thanksgiving? For goodness sakes, he could be dispensing that $5 billion Protect Ontario fund that was in the budget this year that I've heard nothing about since it was announced. It isn't being dispersed to help industry insulate and protect jobs so people aren't laid off. Businesses and workers need relief now. And Doug Ford is, I don't know, on the burger flipping business circuit, rather. He's traveling across the province making announcements here and then. I don't see, any worthwhile efforts to protect jobs or distribute the funding to protect those jobs to industry. He hasn't been doing. What he hasn't been doing is he hasn't been doing what has been needed to be done. We have the second highest unemployment rate in the country. Our youth unemployment is skyrocketing. It is the highest in the country. Ontario is living on the brink because of Doug Ford's mismanagement. This is a big economic blow that could push families and businesses over the line. I'm worried about Ontario's families. He's clinging to old trade models that have to be dispensed with, and we have to do more here locally for our businesses to protect jobs, and he's not doing it.
Before you go, Bunny, I want to ask you about a piece that our team at the Trillium published last week about Tony Miele. He's the head of the PC Ontario Fund. He's the party's chief fundraiser. The piece revealed, among other things, that he doesn't only solicit donations for the party, but is also a paid consultant to developers. How did you react to that? What did you think of the revelations in that piece?
Well, again, certainly he has crossed a lot of lines. There are a lot of conflicts of interest that he's not being held accountable for. But it is a hallmark of this government, the lack of accountability, the lack of transparency, the double standards that they have. they're quick to point fingers at me, but here you have a guy who's selling tickets to a stag and doe and attending the wedding and consulting the very people who are benefiting from decisions this government is making. So there are a lot of ethical lines that have been crossed, and they need to be held accountable.
Yeah. Do you know Tony Miele at all? I think he was on your mayoral transition team or advisory council back in the day. Yeah.
We do know each other. We haven't really had much to do each other in a decade, but we certainly know who we know of each other.
All right, Bonnie, before we let you go, busy time between now and obviously the annual general meeting. Anything that we didn't touch on, parting shots to you?
No parting shots. I will just say that it has been an honor to serve as the leader. I am committed to doing so and continuing to do so. I'm going to put the work in that's necessary to rebuild the party, revitalize the party, and bring the kinds of changes that our members want.
All right, good stuff. There's Ontario Liberal leader Bonnie Crombie. Bonnie, always good to see you. We appreciate your time as always. Have a great weekend.
Thanks so much for having me, everyone. Take care. Bye-bye.
All right. In hindsight, maybe parting shots wasn't what I should have. But you know what I meant.
I don't think that.
Last word to you.
Yeah, I think that's what you meant.
Yeah, that's what I meant.
But she took the high road.
She did.
Yeah, well,
she could have just fired back.
Unlike you. You usually don't take the high road.
It depends on who it is.
I'm just kidding. That was a great conversation.
Great conversation.
You know what? This is what I love about this show. We bring people of all political stripes on. They're all welcome to come on and chat about what's going on. We'll ask some of the tough questions that are on people's minds, the stuff that's making headlines. But it's also an opportunity for her to explain in a long-form way what she's actually been doing, what the party's been doing. And it's clear she's very committed to the long haul.
Is she ever?
I think, I think she has been honest in the sense that they were caught off guard by the snap election and probably shouldn't have been, because even though, yes, there's set election dates, the premier still has the power to call an election. And so that should have been in the back of their mind at all times, right?
Yeah.
She used the word perfect storm in previous interviews to talk about, and I do think there's some element of that, but she took accountability. I think she's saying it does fall on her. She didn't try to deflect it all to everybody else. I'm not a member of the Liberal Party, so I'm not going to be voting on her political future, but it'll be interesting to see what the delegates think.
To be clear, we're not a member of
any
party.
Yeah, exactly.
Wanted to
I appreciate that, because that'll be the headline, right?
That's my parting shot.
Yeah, that's right.
All right. Okay, the weekend's here. Any big plans? Taking it easy?
No, it's work, Scott.
Work.
There's lots going on. The news never stops.
It is 24/7.
Yes.
All right, have a good one.
I'm sure you'll be.
You're sure what?
I won't say it. No.
Golfing?
Yeah.
I'll find a course I can lose some balls on for sure.
All right.
Yeah.
Good.
All right, have a good one. We're back Monday at 7 o'clock. Closer look at villagemedia.ca. Of course, you can follow us Instagram, TikTok, Facebook, X, YouTube, the Village Media Network, and wherever you get your favorite audio podcast. For Michael Friscolanti, I'm Scott Sexsmith. Have a wonderful weekend. Thanks for watching this week. We'll see you Monday night at 7 right here on Closer Look.
Frisco and Scott's Wardrobe provided in part by Moores, Sault Ste. Marie.